Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, what difference will England's land use framework make?
It is finally making explicit what DEFRA wants from land and helping farmers to understand what future food security risks they face, particularly from climate and nature loss.
More on that later. Let's start, though, with oats. They are increasingly attractive as a crop because they need relatively low inputs, are compatible with environmentally friendly rotations, and are rising in value in food markets, like the oat drink market, for instance, for people looking for an alternative to dairy. Well, all this week we are looking at food processing. So how do you get from an oat to a drink? Marie Lennon has been to find out with Jonathan Arnold from grain merchants Robin Appel Limited.
We are just off a main road. We're surrounded by farmland on what is the edge of Salisbury Plain. You wouldn't know any of this exists, but these buildings are vast. What's the capacity? 40,000 tonne grain store?
Yeah, I think 45.
Okay. We go and have a look at your oats?
Yeah, of course.
Great.
This is the sort of processing plant. This is where it all happens.
You come inside and it is a maze of various bits of machinery. So these big steel channels above us, what elevators. Are they and where do they go?
These are belt and bucket elevators. If the grain's wet, it will go to the dryer. If it's dry and needs cleaning, it will come through this cleaner. And all these sieves, where you're trying to take out different sorts of impurities, that's a colour sorter over there, which can be programmed to take out different sorts of impurities. This is a stone trap.
And inside, I can see the oats jumping around.
Yeah, so here they come. We got together with Fenton's where they were looking for a domestic source of oats. You know, that their expertise is ingredient and product formulation and processing and packaging. Our expertise is talking to farmers, getting crops grown. We're working with, 15 to 20 local farmers.
But having the process in place means that for those farmers, they have a direct route to market, which is crucial, especially right now.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Everything we do as Robin Appel Limited is all about connecting farmers to their markets and trying to add some value. Recently, markets have been hard to find for crops. So historically, farmers can produce what they like and it finds a market. Well, that's getting harder and harder. So more and more farmers are seeing the importance of being in a tangible supply chain.
Hi, Sue. Hi. Hello. Just come into the Weybridge office. Sue, what's this and what are you doing?
These are oat groats. I've literally just taken the sample off of the system. Just having a quick look through to see if there's any wheat or barley in there. These are good. These are good oats.
Throughout the day, the oats are then driven the 30 miles from Wiltshire into Somerset to Frampton's, who make the oat drinks. Andy Rummel is the managing director.
We take delivery of the tanker with the groats in, about 25 tonne. We then pass it through a heat treatment section and then we take it through a decanter. Now a decanter is just a big squeeze machine. So the liquid that then comes out makes up 70% of a 1 litre carton. We just use that natural base. You then fill it up with a tiny bit of salt and then a little bit more water. That product then goes into the heat treatment processing, then into the filling packing machines and straight into a carton and then out the other end.
It's one of those products which some people perhaps are moving away from because they think, it's a processed product. You must hear those criticisms.
Absolutely, and I think the misconception is it's not milk. But this is a different functionality. This isn't meant to be a replacement for milk in those kind of senses. It is a standalone product that is a dairy alternative.
How would you describe the climate for a business like yours right now?
It's really challenging. It really is, because the consumers expect a price point. And I think that's just the climate in general. Everything we've set out to do is to onboard it back into the UK from Europe, because it costs 9 to 10 pence just to import it into the UK. So that gives us a little bit of advantage on the pricing that we can do in the UK for our own products, but it's still very challenging. And last year's harvest was better, but the protein levels in the oats were slightly higher, and you've got to make adjustments to all those kind of things to do that.
That report from Marie Lennon. A coherent national vision for how we use our land. That's how the government describes England's land use framework. The details were published yesterday afternoon. And on yesterday's programme, the Farming Minister, Angela Eagle, told Anna Hill it's about the better use of land.
It's about creating a map of the UK and saying that we can actually have multi-uses for the land, which benefit both productivity for farmers, nature and biodiversity, and actually engage in processes that mean we have more resilience as a country. So our analysis shows that we can produce the same amounts of food but have a better, more effective use of land.
The Farming Minister, Angela Eagle. Well, let's give you a little taste of the reaction to this. The Tenant Farmers Association says the framework is long on aspiration and short on the level of granularity that many will have been hoping for to assist in making local decisions on competing land use needs. While the Green Alliance said it was a big step forward, which, if used properly, can protect profitable agriculture on productive land and drive investment into activities on less productive land that reduce flooding, mitigate climate change and improve water quality. Well, the government says it wants to see better planning so land can be used in a multifunctional way for nature, housing, food production, energy generation and biodiversity. It says that to meet the challenges, we need to address the inefficiencies of current land use and that there is a need for change in how some land, largely agricultural land, is used. The framework will, ministers say, be a blueprint for smarter, more informed decisions. And they're clear it's not a document that tells people what to do with their land, nor a replacement for the planning system. The president of the National Farmers Union, Tom Bradshaw, told me farmers will welcome assurances on the importance of food security.
This is a framework. It's not a prescription as to how land should be used in the future. But we need farmers to be able to take the choices as to how their land is best used. I think the plan is that the land use framework will become an interactive map where you'll be able to see what other options there may be for your business and how you can utilise your assets. But making sure that food production is a critical element that continues to be a viable part of farming business is something that we view as being critically important. We do see in there potentially strong protections for the most productive land, which again is something that we believe should be in there to try and maintain that land for food production. So the balance here is going to be very, very important. The detail that's contained within the land use framework will take some working through and then understanding what the longer term consequences are going to be, because clearly some land is going to end up not being used for agriculture. If we are going to meet the commitment to maintaining domestic food production, then we're going to have to see the productivity gains that we question whether they are viable or not. But clearly we're going to have to work with government to make sure that we really can boost domestic productivity to make sure we continue delivering the country's food.
There's a lot of talk about targeting the best places for instance, planting trees. Does that mean that farmers in some areas of the country will see bigger changes than others?
I think there is a likelihood that there will be some areas of the country that come under more pressure for land use change. And what we want to see is that this is a genuine choice, that they have the ability to decide, yes, it's going to provide a more viable future for them if they choose to go down that road, rather than being forced or compelled to go down take those options. So I think that clearly a multifunctional land use framework is very easy to set out on paper, but how it works in reality is going to be crucially important. I also think that it's going to be updated regularly as any more evidence comes forward. And so that's going to, over the coming years, it's going to be really important to see how the first stages are developed and make sure that it works with farmers and for farmers, while also protecting the natural landscape and iconic landscapes, which are so important to wider society.
Do you think some farmers will just sigh, think this is just more people telling me what to do with my business and put it in the bin?
I think that there will be some farmers that are looking at this and thinking, well, just how is this relevant to me? And that's clearly going to be a challenge. But I also, at a landscape level, there's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of advice given as to how that land can be best used to try and maximise returns for the farming business. But I don't think anyone sees this as being sort of instrumental in overnight change in the way any farmers move forwards. But I think we have legislated environmental targets, we have a legislated net zero target, we have housing targets, we have water targets, and in here we have a clear commitment to domestic food production as well. And seeing how that can all be delivered on an island nation with 70 million people, it's going to be a real challenge. And the area that we're most focused on is how do we make sure we have a resilient supply of food for consumers? It's never been more important than when we look around the world at the moment and see all the geopolitical instability. We know that climate change is having an impact, and making sure that the UK has a resilient supply of food is in 70 million people's interests, and that's what we'll be focused on over the coming weeks and months.
Tom Bradshaw there from the NFU. Dustin Benton, formerly from the Green Alliance, now Managing Director of Sustainability at Forefront Advisors, which provides public affairs insights to companies, told me he welcomes the long-awaited framework.
It's tentative, of course, but it's a big step in the right direction because it is finally making explicit what DEFRA wants from land and helping farmers to understand what future food security risks they face, particularly from climate and nature loss. So I would say I'm pretty optimistic about it.
It does see using land for multiple things as being really important. Is that perhaps as easy as the framework suggests it might be? Because some of the land use change is sort of easily doable in a sense, things like using cover crops or planting field margins. But it also talks about changing the use of 9% of the country's farmed land to peat restoration, woodland creation and so on. And that could be a lot harder.
I don't think it's technically difficult. I think the thing that's missing is that there hasn't been a business model for farmers and landowners to do that. I actually think that it could be quite a lot more than 9% from an economic perspective, i.e. what would make the most money and deliver the most public good for the use of the land. But aside from the percentages, I think the main challenge to that sort of change, again, it's not technical, it's a combination of money and pride. On the money front, the government needs to support land use change so that there is a viable business opportunity out of that. I have been a government analyst, including at DEFRA, and I can tell you there is enough public money available to make that happen, especially if you can bring in payments from the carbon market and potentially nature markets.
Although those have been talked about for a long time and they've never quite managed to become a reality for most.
Yeah, it's been very slow going. I completely agree. What we need is some money from carbon removals, and we also need to deploy the money that's available for nature restoration from the private sector a bit more efficiently. That bit is complicated. I completely agree. But if you stack up the numbers, it ought to be much more profitable, especially in the uplands, to farm mostly carbon and a little bit of livestock compared to today. The thing that I'm optimistic about the land use framework with is that I can see many ways in which farmers, landscapes and local communities are far better off through significant land use change than by trying to hold things as they are today.
Although the government's very clear, it says this isn't a document that tells people what to do with their land, nor a replacement for the planning system. So I suppose some people might ask, well, what is it then?
It's a guide. It's a steer. If you think about what the way we have transitioned the energy system, which has gone through an extraordinary transition over the last 15 years, the government said, we think that systems needs to look different. We will set some expectations. We will match that with regulation and incentives. But they started by saying, we're going to ditch coal. We are going to grow renewables by a factor of 10. And we need private money and the ability to make private profit by doing that. This is the beginning of that. So even if you don't want to, if your approach to the land use framework is, I'm quite happy using the land the way I am, then you could ignore it. But what you'd be ignoring is the opportunity to do things differently, probably better, and if nothing else, much more resilient to the changing climate that we are certain to have in the next 50 years.
Dustin Benton, and that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.